If everyone's ready,
Good to go.
stand by. This is the beginning of disc number 1 of the deposition of Robert Tootin. We are on the record, and today's date is Wednesday, July 28th, and the time is 4:59 p.m. Counsel have agreed to waive the usual videographer's introduction, so would counsel please introduce themselves and state whom you represent, starting with plaintiff's counsel, and then will the court reporter please swear in the witness.
My name is Clint Kelly. I represent Mr. and Ms. Lonnie and Keely Lonnie.
Tom Wiseman for Dr. Christopherson and TOA.
Marty Phillips for HCA Health Services of Tennessee, Inc.
Doctor, will you raise your right hand, please? You swear the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
State your name, please, sir.
Hans Robert Tootin.
Dr. Tootin, as an orthopedic surgeon, I'm sure you've given quite a bit of depositions in personal injury cases and things like that, right?
A few.
Okay. You know the format generally of a deposition. I'm going to ask you questions, and I want to just mention to you a couple of things. One is if you need to refer to anything in order to answer my question, please do. All right?
Okay.
Do you have your file materials with you today?
Yes.
All right. And if you don't understand a question I ask you, would you be sure to tell me, and I'll repeat it or rephrase it?
Okay.
Is that fair?
Yes.
All right. And if you don't do that, I'm going to assume you understood my question when you answered it. Is that fair also?
Yes.
All right. So tell me, first of all, how many times have you given a deposition in a case involving a claim of medical malpractice?
I have no idea.
Okay. Well, I've got a list of trial and depositions in the last 4 years. Are you familiar with this document? I'll show it to you.
I believe it.
Okay. You believe that's accurate?
Yes.
When is the last time you gave a deposition in a case involving a claim of medical malpractice?
I gave a deposition, I don't know, you were here. When was that? Three weeks, a month ago?
Okay, what was the case about?
Am I allowed to tell you?
Sure. It's public record.
I don't recall.
You don't recall the facts of the case you gave a deposition in 3 or 4 weeks ago? Not a thing about it?
I don't.
Not a thing about the type of procedure that was involved?
Not that I'm comfortable telling you about.
Well, that's different.
That was a HIPAA violation.
Were you a treating physician?
No.
Then how would it be a HIPAA violation?
I don't know.
It's not,
Okay.
if you'll accept my representation. So tell me what the case was about.
I'm blanking out.
Really? Do you need to take a break and drink some water or something?
I mean, is it on that list?
I don't know, because I would assume if you gave it 3 or 4 weeks ago, it's not on the list that I received more than 3 or 4 weeks ago.
The case was about a slipped capital femoral epiphysis that was missed, and the girl developed avascular necrosis and needed a hip replacement.
And how old was the girl?
It's a long, strung-out case, but I think she ended up with her hip being replaced at the age of 15.
All right. And where was the case pending? In other words, where did the surgery or the treatment take place?
Kentucky.
And were you testifying on behalf of the patient?
No.
On behalf of the defendant physician?
I'm sorry. I was the expert on the plaintiff's behalf.
All right. And what were the claims of negligence in that case, just generally speaking?
That the surgeon missed the slipped capital femoral epiphysis on 3 or 4 occasions.
Do you recall what community that physician was practicing in?
It was nowhere near anything that I could describe. It was Kentucky. It was near Daniel Boone Forest.
And was the physician a pediatric orthopedic surgeon?
He was not.
Was he an orthopedic he or she orthopedic surgeon?
Orthopedic surgeon.
And who was the plaintiff's lawyer you hired you in that case?
I don't recall.
Have you ever worked with that lawyer before?
No.
All right. What about the deposition that you recall giving before the one in Kentucky you just identified? What's the last one that comes to mind?
That's probably been several years, as far as I can tell.
What do you mean as far as you can tell?
I don't recall.
All right. Does the name Kelsey L. Kimberlin, Kimberlin, ring a bell?
So that should be the slipped capital femoral epiphysis.
Well, this says the deposition was on December 9, 2019. So tell me,
Well, we just did a deposition concerning this Kelsey Kimberlin 3 or 4 weeks ago,
okay, maybe that was for evidence at the trial?
possibly.
It says here that the trial date is in July of 2021.
I don't think it ever went to trial, and I think they were, I don't know what the outcome was.
Tell me about Amani, Almaliky, case that's listed here as being in June of 2019 in the state of Michigan.
I think that was a missed hip dysplasia.
And did you testify on behalf of the patient as an expert witness?
I think so, yes.
Did you testify at trial of that case?
I did not.
Ryan Skinkle, Skinkle, what was that case about?
That I don't recall.
Don't recall anything about it.
Mm-mm. Where was it?
It didn't say. This has your name on it. Listed.
No, I believe it. I don't recall.
What about Carmen Mayfield? Do you recall anything about that case?
I do not.
How many cases besides this case involving Keely Lonning do you currently have in terms of being open cases on which you are serving as an expert witness?
So the one from Kentucky, I think, is wrapped up. This is the only open case I have, and I'm an expert in a what do you call it, when they were going after a company for a formula that a bunch of kids developed hypophosphatemic rickets from. Class action lawsuit.
Okay. Are you an expert witness in that class action lawsuit?
So designated, yes.
The product manufacturer side or the class plaintiff side?
Plaintiff side.
And what's the general allegations or nature of that class action?
So there is a pediatric formula that they didn't absorb the phosphate, and a bunch of kids developed hypophosphatemic rickets.
And what is your role in that case? Is it to describe their injuries, or does it also include describing the connection between the formula and the rickets?
It was mainly, a lot of the kids developed the rickets with multiple fractures and the long-term sequelae of that.
Are you testifying about the injuries, or are you also testifying about the pathophysiology of how the formula caused the rickets and caused the problem?
No, the GI doctors and the endocrinologists are handling most of that. I'm kind of doing the orthopedic side of it.
Where is that class action case pending?
I think the firm is an international firm. The attorney is up in the District of Columbia.
Okay. Do you know out of what state the case
I
is?
don't.
Okay. What's the name of the D.C. Lawyer or firm?
Mitchell.
Mitchell, is that the firm or the lawyer?
That's the lawyer, Jerry Mitchell. But it may be the firm too.
Okay. Do you advertise your services as an expert witness?
I do not.
Have you ever?
No.
How many times have you actually testified sitting in the witness stand in a courtroom?
Maybe twice.
When was the last time you did that?
St. Louis.
That must have been a memorable experience, so I'm hoping you have a memory about the facts of that case.
I'll do my best.
All right, let's hear it.
What do you want to know?
The facts of the case.
So it was, I was defending the surgeon in this case. Patient had scoliosis and had an event where they lost nerve function.
What was the event?
They became paralyzed.
Okay, what was the event that caused the loss of nerve function?
It's probably that they lost blood pressure. They got hypotensive.
I know what that is. When you say they, are you talking about the anesthesiologist, the
It was
orthopedic surgeon?
well, it was the whole, something happened and the pressure went down, and it probably caused an ischemic event to the spinal cord.
And was it an air embolus? What was your conclusion as to the cause?
I don't think it was an air embolus. I think, sometimes you get, I don't think it was someone, we got hypotensive, and that's what happened.
A bad outcome, but it wasn't anybody's fault. Was that your conclusion?
It was.
And what was the result of the trial?
They did not find in favor of the surgeon.
And what was the name of the surgeon?
I want to say it was per year.
Per year? And it was
Puryear.
And it was in St. Louis?
It was in St. Louis.
St. Louis is an interesting community. Was it in the city of St. Louis?
I believe so. But
I hear it's hard to win jury trials in St. Louis.
You may know more than me.
I probably do. You don't recall where the courtroom was?
It was in the middle of St. Louis,
Okay.
downtown St. Louis.
And what about the other trial that you testified in as a witness? Tell me about that one.
That was a child abuse case.
Was that here in Richmond?
That was in Georgia.
Were you hired for the defendant or for the prosecution?
I don't think I was hired at all. I was the treating physician, and I went to the court to testify that on my opinion as to whether it was child abuse or not.
Was this when you were in training?
No, this was when I was in practice. I practiced in South Georgia for about 6 years before I came to Richmond.
All right. Tell me about your practice now. Tell me what is Tuckahoe Orthopedic Associates? Is it a group? And if it is, tell me how many members.
It's a private practice group. There's 15 of us. I'm fellowship trained in pediatric orthopedics. 98% of my practice is pediatric orthopedic surgery.
And are there any other pediatric orthopedic surgeons affiliated with Tuckahoe Orthopedic Associates?
Yes.
How many?
2 right now.
What are their names?
Chad Ahrens and Greg Hale.
And do they also devote as much as 98% of their time to pediatric orthopedics?
Yes.
How long has 98% of pediatric orthopedics characterized your practice?
For the last 20 years.
On your CV, it notes you're associate clinical assistant professor at MCV. Is that that's not a faculty position, is it?
No.
How often do you do anything there?
Actually, I've lost that since I stopped taking call down there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
At one time, you were on call there.
Well, that's a long story. They tried to get me to start taking call down there recently, and I didn't want to, so they rescinded my privilege.
Well, I have some familiarity with academic medicine. I just wanted to be sure that my assumptions about what associate clinical assistant professor means.
It's just a title.
Right. Same is true for your work in the Department of PM&R as an associate clinical professor.
Correct.
Are you still doing that, or is that
No.
over? Where do you perform most of your surgeries?
At St. Mary's.
That's across the street here, I guess, or on this campus?
It is.
How many beds is it?
I want to say 350, give or take.
Does it have a separate pediatric building or wing?
It has a pediatric wing, and it has a pediatric ICU.
Is it a certain level trauma center?
It's not level 1.
Okay. To your knowledge, is it level 2?
Possibly.
Are you on call for the trauma service?
I'm not. I don't take call anymore.
Did you age out?
I aged out.
How old are you?
I'm 56.
Wow, that's a pretty generous age. When did you age out?
55.
How many surgeries? Let's strike that. Let me ask it this way. Tell me how your week is organized currently in your practice.
So Monday I have clinic all day. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday I do surgery in the morning and have clinic in the afternoon.
Approximately how many surgeries involving general anesthesia do you perform a week?
You know, summer's busy. Depends if I do a lot of scoliosis. I'll do anywhere from 6 to 15 cases a week.
Is scoliosis and working with patients with scoliosis a significant part of your practice?
I do a fair number of scoliosis cases.
Do you consider it to be a special interest of yours?
It is.
And in this group, are you the go-to guy for scoliosis patients?
I do the majority of the scoliosis cases.
Is that true at St. Mary's Hospital too?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the procedure that's involved in this case is a bilateral femoral osteotomy, is that right?
Yes.
How many of those procedures have you performed in your career?
I don't count them, but I'm going to assume 100.
All right. Now, what have you, well, let me ask you this. Have you looked at Dr. Christopherson's videotape deposition?
Yes.
Did you review the actual videotape where he described the procedure?
Yes.
And after seeing that videotape, can you tell me if you heard him say anything that you thought was incorrect when he described the mechanics of the procedure itself?
No.
Do you hold the opinion that Dr. Christopherson deviated from the standard of care expected of him?
I think he feels bad about the outcome of the case, and I feel that his assistant could have done a better job.
Okay. This is a, I don't know if Mr. Kelly may have explained this to you, but and I'm not sure how Virginia works, but this is an opportunity for me to ask questions to be prepared for trial. And I hope you'll accept my representation that the jury is not going to see this deposition because it's not proof, unless it's used to cross-examine you because you say A today and I think you said B at the trial. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So, you know, I came a long way from Nashville, Tennessee to find out if you hold the opinion that Dr. Christopherson deviated from the standard of care. So let me ask you this. Do you understand what the phrase deviate from the standard of care means?
I think I do.
All right. I want you to assume that it means that there was a deviation from the recognized standard of acceptable professional practice as that standard existed in Nashville, Tennessee or similar community at the time Keeley-Lonning surgery took place. Does that definition make some sense to you?
It does.
You know, sometimes we call it malpractice, the lawyers do, sometimes health care liability cases. Did Dr. Christopherson comply with the standard of care in the procedure he performed on Keeley-Lonning, in your opinion?
I think in retrospect he would have done a few things differently, but I think he did the best job he could with what he had at hand.
All right. You know, retrospect, hindsight bias, all that stuff is hard to get around in cases. Do you, I just need to have an answer if you can answer it yes or no. Do you agree that without the benefit of hindsight, but at the time of the surgery, based on everything you reviewed in this case, did Dr. Christopherson comply with the standard of care as I've defined it for you?
So this is my opinion. I think he did a good job. I think there's an assistant in the case that was hired by the hospital, paid by the hospital, who did not do his sole job, which was to keep the guide wire in the canal, and there's an unfortunate outcome. You know, as a surgeon, you have a feeling that you're the captain of the ship and that you have a responsibility, but if the deckhand puts diesel fuel in a boat that needs gas, God bless America.
and you used a phrase that is important and one that I wanted to cover with you. I don't know what the law is in Virginia. The phrase "captain of the ship" is a phrase that surgeons often use, right?
Yes.
Because it is generally felt by surgeons that you're responsible as a surgeon for everybody and everything that happens in the operating room. Is that a fair way to describe captain of the ship?
You take the patient care seriously.
Right, exactly. I want you to assume that the captain of the ship doctrine doesn't exist in Tennessee. Okay, let's just take that assumption and we'll move forward. Was it reasonable for Dr. Christopherson to rely on Mr. Allen, the surgical assistant, to do his sole job to keep that guide wire in place in the femoral canal?
I think so. I think Mr. Allen had a track record of experience. He'd done these cases before. He'd worked with this physician before. I think, yeah, if it was his first case or he'd never done it before, we could cut him some slack.
When you do this particular procedure, do you have a surgical assistant who has the job of keeping the guide wire in place?
Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't.
Okay. And when you don't, what techniques do you use with the guide wire?
You know, one is with the greater trochanteric entry site, and Keely, her name's Keely, right? She's not obese, so that it's pretty easy to find the hole. I did a rod today. I thought about this case while doing the rod. The hole's right there. You just keep it in the hole.
Yeah.
You know, you can grab it with a coker, you can grab it with a clamp, you can use a soft tissue protector. You just need to keep it in the hole.
And this, using the guide wire and the reamer to increase the diameter in the femoral canal, is something that's done for IM nailing, right? I mean,
Correct.
it's IM nailing, N-A-I-L-I-N-G, my southern accent. What other procedures besides an osteotomy, besides IM nailing, that are in your surgical armamentarium where the guide wire and reamer are used? What other types of procedures?
So when do you put in a rod? Fractures, tumors, if you're doing an osteotomy where you're trying to correct deformity, most of the time we're doing it in the femur, occasionally the tibia, and occasionally the humerus. Less so in like the radius and the ulna, but you can use rods and other bones.
You mentioned that there are times when there is an assistant in the operating room that assists you in these types of procedures. Is that right?
Correct.
And when there is an assistant in the room, tell me what the assistant's job is when you're doing, let's say, a bilateral femoral osteotomy with an assistant. What is that assistant's job or duty with respect to the guide wire?
So if it's a resident, oftentimes I'm holding the guide wire while they're reaming. If you know, you just try to get them to catch it and make sure it doesn't come out and hold it in place.
And when you do have residents, and I've that's been mentioned to me by others in your same field, that oftentimes the attending will serve the role of ensuring the guide wire stays in place, right?
Correct.
Have you ever had a guide wire completely exit the femoral canal while you were serving in that role of holding it in place?
The guide wire comes out all the time.
Under what circumstances?
It just comes out. The reamer binds up to it. It gets stuck. It gets pulled out. It happens all the time.
And when that happens, when you're serving in the role that Mr. Allen did, though you're an attending, do you notify the resident physician that the guide wires come out?
No, I usually just put the guide wire back down.
Okay. When you're serving that role, are you sitting or standing?
I'm usually standing.
Tell me the mechanics of how to get of finding the correct location and returning the guide wire to the femoral canal.
So it's a big hole. It's probably 16 millimeters in diameter because you have to over-ream it. So you can find it with your finger, and you just put the wire down it. And, you know, it's kind of like putting a wire down a Coke bottle. You feel the hard bone in the canal, and then it tamps out at the end, and it bottoms out. So it's a very tactile sensation. Up in the upper part, it'll give you almost a graty, crunchy sensation, and then at the bottom, it just clunks.
What tactile response would you expect if you were to attempt to return the guide wire to the femoral canal instead of being in the canal, being outside the femur going into soft tissue?
To pass it as far as I believe Mr. Allen did, I think would have required quite a bit of force, and it would have been a very odd sensation.
And tell me, when you say it would have required quite a bit of force, what would that force have been going through? What would have been causing that force?
So he'd have passed the wire behind the bone through the muscle and the soft tissues all the way down to the knee.
Can you approximate the distance for me?
It's probably a good almost 2 feet.
When you heard Dr. Christopherson describe that because of the way the setup was and changing out the reamer bit to increase the diameter, there were times when he would have to turn his back to the surgical field. Is that generally true?
That happens. That's what you do. You turn around so you don't drop anything on the floor, and you go to the back table, and you've got to switch out the reamers, and then you turn back around.
Let's take a quick break.
We're off the record. The time is 5:26. We're back on the record. The time is 5:28 p.m. Council may proceed.
Doctor, I don't have any more questions right now. I might have some after Mr. Phillips asks you questions. Thank you.
Doctor, as you know, I represent HCA in this case. Similar to Mr. Weinman, I'm here to find out the opinions you hold pertaining to HCA or any of its employees. You understand that, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any opinion that you hold with regard to any HCA employee other than Mike Allen?
I don't think so.
Okay. Have you reached a conclusion regarding whether Mike Allen, the surgical assistant, complied with the standard of care in this particular case?
Do you feel ask me the question without being an attorney.
Well, the legal issue that you've been disclosed on is the standard of care.
Right.
That's how we often shorten it. The definition in Tennessee actually is the recognized standard of acceptable professional practice required of, in this case, a surgical assistant in Nashville, Tennessee, or a similar community in 2019. So that's the question. Did Mr. Allen comply with the standard of care?
I don't feel he did.
Do you think you know the standard of care for a surgical assistant?
I think I have an opinion about that.
Yeah, that's a little different issue, though. You're not a surgical assistant, right?
I am not.
You've not trained as one?
No.
So you don't know the standard of care for a surgical assistant, do you? You know the standard of care for a pediatric orthopedic surgeon.
I think working with surgical assistants for many years gives me the ability to render an opinion as to what would be expected from a surgical assistant.
My question is different. You don't claim to know the standard of care for a surgical assistant, do you?
I don't know the definition of the standard of care for a surgical assistant, but if I'm working with a surgical assistant, I'm going to have expectations of how they should be used and their ability to perform certain functions.
So what you have is an opinion about your expectations as it pertains to Mr. Allen, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So what opinion do you have with regard to Mr. Allen as it pertains to your expectations?
I feel he deviated from the standard of care by not keeping the guide wire in the canal during the reaming process.
Is that it?
Again, I'm not an attorney. If there's more specifics, I'm happy to help.
Well, let me try to ask a better question. Is that the only way Mr. Allen didn't meet your expectations?
I think that's the most obvious way. Was there something else I should add?
I don't know, doctor. I'm interested in the opinion you have. Is that your sole opinion as it pertains to Mr. Allen, or are there others?
I don't know. This sounds like a trick question. So I think he deviated from the standard of care during this case by not keeping the guide wire in the canal during the reaming process.
I got that one.
Okay.
I just want to know if there's anything else for which you criticize Mr. Allen, or do we have a singular issue in this case?
I think that's the main issue.
I'm interested in all of them, whether you consider them main or secondary. Or
Well,
any others.
as you know, they brought up other issues as to, substance use and things like that. But again, I'm going to focus on the case at hand.
You have not disclosed any opinion in your disclosure about substance abuse, have you?
I don't think I have.
And you don't intend to offer any opinion about that in this case, do you?
No.
You don't think it played any role in what happened here, do you?
I don't know.
You're not going to offer any opinion that it did?
No.
Okay. So have we covered the opinions you hold as to Mr. Allen?
I think so.
Okay. What's the factual basis for your opinion that he didn't keep the guide in the proper place?
The trauma that developed afterwards to the sciatic nerve.
Did anybody see him do anything in the OR that has been described as improper?
That I don't know. Just knowing how this surgery is performed and the steps that unfold and reading all the depositions, that's how I rendered my opinion.
Do you have any evidence that anybody in the OR actually saw Mr. Allen do something wrong with regard to the guide wire?
I don't.
So this is an opinion you have to try to figure out what happened here? Is that what it is?
Well, we know what happened.
Well, why it happened, I guess, is a better way of saying it.
Well, so if a physician is reaming the femur and the guide wire comes out, and the guy who's responsible for keeping the guide wire in, it's pretty self-explanatory.
How did the guide wire come out?
They come out all the time.
Did Dr. Christopherson pull it out when he was pulling the reamer off?
Well, so as the reamer's coming out, the guide wire oftentimes backs up, and then you slide it back down.
How much did the guide wire come out?
That I don't know.
How long is it total?
The guide wire?
Yes.
There's different sizes. They're pretty long. Some of them are, 3.5, 4 feet. I don't know what size they used. I guess we could go through the records, but I don't recall. But they're pretty long guide wires.
Do you have an understanding as to how much of the guide wire you contend came out?
No.
Do you have an understanding as to how long Dr. Christopherson's back was turned?
20, 30 seconds.
Is that what he said?
No, I'm just guessing that from what it takes to turn and switch a reamer and hook it back up and take the old one off. And
How long does it take to put a guide wire back in place if it comes out?
5 seconds.
Was Mr. Allen aware that the guide wire was in an improper position?
I don't think he was.
How long does it take to change the reamer head?
There's different kinds. Some hook right onto the drill. Some have a head that slips on and off. But again, to take the reamer out, cradle it, turn, switch it, put the other one on, again, I'm going to say 30 seconds.
When you're doing a procedure like this and you're pulling the reamer off, if the reamer is pulling the guide wire out, can you see that?
You can get a sense that it's doing that.
It's something you're aware of as the surgeon. Yes.
Yes.
And if it comes all the way out, do you know that?
Well, if it comes all the way out, then you put it back in. And, you know, I'm going to state that Mr. Allen should have been able to put it back in.
My question was, if the guide wire came all the way out, is that something that you as the surgeon would be aware of?
Yes.
Are there any other points during the procedure at which the sciatic nerve injury could occur?
I don't think so.
The expert disclosure that's in front of you, did you review that before it was given to us?
The plaintiff Rule 26 disclosures,
Yes, it discloses you as an expert.
I have looked at this.
Did you approve it?
I did.
And at the time this disclosure was provided to us, and is yours dated on the last page?
I don't see a date.
So at the time the disclosure was reviewed by you, had you looked at all the same materials that you've looked at in preparation for today's deposition?
So at the time that we did this disclosure, I looked at what was available to me. There's probably been some things added since.
Had you looked at the Centennial medical records, for instance, before the disclosure was reviewed and approved?
I looked at everything that was sent to me.
Would that have included the Centennial records?
Yes.
And Dr. Christopherson's deposition?
Was that? I don't even remember the date of that. That was before or after this?
I can't answer that for
I
you.
don't know. I mean, you'd have to look at the dates. I don't recall the dates.
In the disclosure, you set forth some opinions starting at the bottom of page 3 as it pertains to Dr. Christopherson. You see those opinions?
I do.
Starts at the bottom of page 3, goes through the middle of page 4.
I do.
Did you review and approve those opinions as to Dr. Christopherson before the disclosure was sent to us?
Repeat that again.
Yes. Did you review and approve those opinions on page 3 and 4 of the disclosure pertaining to Dr. Christopherson?
I did approve this disclosure.
Are those still your opinions?
I've probably gotten more data since, and I may have changed my opinion concerning Mr. Allen.
Concerning Mr. Allen,
Yes.
how have you changed your opinion as it pertains to Mr. Allen?
Well, I feel he had more of a role during this procedure than I probably earlier thought.
So what was your initial opinion as to Mr. Allen?
I guess I didn't realize his expertise and how many years he'd been doing this and how the room was set up and what his role was during this case. And I understand now that his sole role was to keep the guide pin in the canal.
When did you come upon that information?
I don't recall.
Do you have any documents that would tell us when you were provided materials in this case?
Everything is right here.
Is there anything that would tell us when you received the materials?
I don't know. I don't think so. You're
Can
welcome.
I look at your notebook
Absolutely.
here?
Absolutely.
So everything that's in this notebook, is that what you've reviewed in this case?
Yes. And there's CDs and things like that.
These are just medical records and imaging studies?
Correct. Depositions, EMG, nerve conduction velocities.
Are there depositions in here?
Yes.
Did this all come to you at one time?
No.
You got part of the notebook and then the rest came later?
I believe so.
So what did you do? Just add stuff to the notebook as it came in?
Correct.
Do you have any emails or correspondence from Mr. Kelly or his office about this case?
I don't think so.
Do we have documents that would show when he sent materials in the case and what he sent?
I sent stuff by Dropbox to him, and I talked to him by phone. I don't know if I can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, I usually give my material to my secretary and she collates it and puts it in this notebook.
So your secretary made this notebook?
I believe so.
I want to request whatever email and correspondence you had with Mr. Kelly or his office about this case. How recently did you receive material in the case?
I recently received an EMG and nerve conduction velocity. A month ago? I don't know.
So looking back at the disclosure that you reviewed and approved, at the bottom of page 3, it says the surgeon is supposed to know the extraction of the reamer to change reamer heads can extract the guide wire from the femur. Is that your opinion today?
So if you don't have an assistant, obviously the surgeon has to do all of that. But if he's got an assistant, then the assistant needs to assist the surgeon.
It is the opinion that I just read to you from the disclosure still your opinion today?
So again, you know, if it's just the surgeon doing the case all by himself, then that's, yes, that paragraph holds. But if he's got an assistant, then the assistant needs to assist.
When you reviewed and approved this disclosure, you knew that there was an assistant involved in this surgery, didn't you?
I did, but again, I'm not an attorney. You know, I put these things together. You know, I'm not perfect. I'm not an attorney.
Continuing on at the bottom of page 3 on to page 4, it says, before reaming, the standard of care requires the surgeon to know where the guide wire is positioned. Is that your opinion today?
Yes.
Then it says, This ensures the guide wire is properly positioned so the reamer does not stray outside the femur. Is that your opinion today?
Yes.
Then your disclosure says Dr. Christopherson deviated from the standard of care when he started reaming outside the right femur without knowing where the guide wire was positioned. Is that your opinion today?
Well, again, I'm gonna state that he had an assistant.
Well, you knew that when this disclosure was drafted.
Well, so maybe I made an error filling this thing out. But again, I'm not an attorney.
You had an attorney helping you with this, though, didn't you, Mr. Kelly?
Yes,
He drafted this, you read it and approved it.
most likely.
So the sentence I just read that says Dr. Christopherson deviated from the standard of care when he started reaming outside the right femur without knowing where the guide wire was positioned. Do you hold that opinion today?
I feel the physician bears some responsibility, but again, he had an assistant whose sole job was to keep the guide pin in the femur.
Tell me if this sentence is true. Dr. Christopherson deviated from the standard of care when he started reaming outside the right femur without knowing where the guide wire was positioned. Is that a true statement?
In context, I guess it is a true statement, but again, if he had an assistant, I don't feel it applies.
But you knew there was an assistant involved from the very outset of this case. You mentioned the assistant in the disclosure, right?
I know, and you've been beating me with a wet noodle over this, but I'm going to just state my, that's the deal.
The next sentence on page 4 says, it does not comply with the standard of care for Dr. Christopherson to assume Mr. Allen reinserted the guide wire properly without knowing that he did. Is that your opinion?
Which one is that again?
Page 4. Let me find it for you. Your pages are numbered differently than mine. Looks like you have a different version of the disclosure than was provided to us.
This shouldn't be the case. This is just his section of it.
Yeah. So let's mark this disclosure as Exhibit 2. Do we have a copy of the disclosure that was actually served? A clean one?
No, not a clean one. You want to see the whole thing I got in.
I just brought the portion.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I look at it?
No.
Do you need to mark that as Exhibit 2?
You want that marked as
Yes, that's 2. And I'm going to mark a clean. Go ahead.
Where's exhibit 1?
It's the email and correspondence that'll be provided later.
Oh, okay. In just a minute.
And then as Exhibit 3, we're going to mark the plaintiff's expert disclosures, which were served on March 1, 2021.
You got that?
I'll have to provide you a clean copy. This is Mr. Wiseman's copy, and it's got some notes on it. Thank you. So here's the sentence I was asking you about, Dr. Toomey. The disclosure that we provided attributes this opinion to you. It does not comply with the standard of care for Dr. Christopherson to assume Mr. Allen reinserted the guidewire properly without knowing that he did. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Is that your opinion today?
I don't think so.
So why have you changed your mind on that?
I feel, looking at the whole case, I feel Mr. Allen has to bear some responsibility for this outcome.
Are you saying that Dr. Christopherson bears no responsibility?
Oh, I mean, he bears a burden. It's broken his heart. It's crushed him. It's probably kept him awake at night. As an orthopedic surgeon, I feel badly for him, but I feel Mr. Allen has to bear some responsibility as well.
Are you saying that Mr. Allen should bear all the responsibility here?
I think that's for the court to decide.
You don't think the surgeon has any role whatsoever in confirming the placement of the guidewire?
I think the surgeon has a role, but I think, you know, as his assistant didn't do his job.
The disclosure continues, and I'll let you read with me here. To ensure proper placement of the guidewire before reaming, the standard of care requires the surgeon to check the position of the guidewire. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
That's the opinion set forth in the disclosure, right?
Yes.
Is that your opinion today?
It is, but again, if you have an assistant doing that for you,
Then it goes on, if you want to read along with me. He can do this by using the tip of his finger at the entry point into the femur, by repositioning the guidewire, or by obtaining fluoroscopy images. Did I read that correctly?
you did.
Is that your opinion today?
Yes.
Then it says Dr. Christopherson deviated from the standard of care when he failed to check the position of the guidewire before reaming. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Is that your opinion today?
Yes.
Then it says he drilled through several inches of tissue and muscle which lacerated the sciatic nerve. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Is that your opinion today?
Yes.
Then it says had Dr. Christopherson checked the position of the guidewire before reaming, there would be no sciatic nerve entry. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Is that your opinion today?
Yes.
Do you use an obturator when you do femoral osteotomies?
No.
Do
Or
you use,
rarely. I should
do
say
you
rarely.
use them in any procedure?
Not very often.
What does an obturator do?
An obturator is there's different kinds, but it's designed to hopefully protect the soft tissue while you're reaming and doing surgery.
If you have different opinions today than you expressed on March 1, 2021, what has happened to change your opinions or modify them?
Well, this is, and again, I'm not an attorney. When you file these forms are filed in order to push the lawsuit forward. Is that correct?
These are expert disclosures that were given as the case went along, subject to a court order deadline.
So, you know, this was what we signed and filled out. But I guess looking at more and more data and sifting through this, I feel Mr. Allen has more of a role in this than...
What I want to... I'm sorry, were you finished?
I'm finished enough.
Okay. What I want to understand is precisely what information you received since March 1, 2021 about this case.
Probably not any specific information. You know, I've digested all this paperwork on multiple occasions, read through these depositions, read through the procedure notes, you know, looked at these MRIs, and you know, this is in my opinion, you know, the hospitals hire these people, they put them to work, and then they burden the surgeon with all of the liability. And I think some of the liability needs to fall on some of the other employees. He's had issues where they didn't have the right saw in the room, and he had to cancel surgeries in the past. You know, there's a chain of events here, and a surgeon or an attorney or a whatever can't do everything. So he's got to rely on some people to step up to the table and do their role. And I don't think Mr. Allen did it.
Did the issue about the saw play any role in this case?
No, but it reflects on that hospital system, and maybe they're not doing things as well as they could be doing.
So back to the question I was posing, Dr. Tootin. Have you received any additional medical records regarding Keeley Lawning since March 1st, 2021?
Everything I've got is right here. I looked at her EMG and nerve conduction velocity that was done recently, maybe 4 weeks ago.
Okay. Any other medical records that you may have received since March 1, 2021?
Again, I'm not great at dates. Everything I've got is right here.
Okay. Before March 1st, 2021, are you confident that you had the records from Centennial Hospital where the surgery was done in May of 2019?
I don't think I had all the data at that time. I probably had read the op note and had talked to Mr. Kelly.
So you think as of the March 1st, 2021, when the disclosure with your opinions in it was filed, you had not read all of the Centennial Hospital records pertaining to the surgery in question?
I'd probably read all the hospital Centennial records.
Okay, well let's come back to my question. Before the disclosure on March 1, 2021, had you read all of the records from Centennial Hospital for the admission where the surgery was performed that's at issue in the case?
Most likely I had, yes.
Okay. Before March 1, 2021, had you read Dr. Christopherson's deposition?
When was his deposition?
August 24, 2020.
Yes.
And had you watched the video of his deposition by March 1st, 2021?
Yes.
Had you read the deposition of Mike Allen before March 1st, 2021?
I can't confirm that. When was that done?
Do you have Mr. Allen's deposition? I'll let you tell me. There's your notebook.
I remember seeing him on a video, but I don't, it may not be in here. I've looked at Mr. Allen's deposition, but I don't recall when it was.
Is it in the notebook?
It's either in the notebook or in one of these. I don't know where it is, but I've seen it.
All right, so can we agree that Mr. Mike Allen's deposition is not in the paper section of your notebook?
Kind of look at that, doctor.
Please.
Yeah, let me help you out here. I know he's got it, Mark.
No, we've got it somewhere. And it may be on one of those flash drives. It may be.
She may not have printed it out, but I'm going to represent to you. He's got it.
No,
We've
I've
discussed
seen that.
it.
We've discussed it.
No question about it. I don't know why it's not in here.
So I was simply asking, the deposition of Mike Allen is not in the paper section of your notebook there, is it?
It is not.
The deposition of Dr. Christopherson is there.
Yes.
But you're telling me that you have received Mr. Allen's deposition.
Yes.
When did you get it?
I don't know.
Did you read it?
I read it, and I also watched the videotape.
Did you do all that before March 1st, 2021?
I can't confirm that. I don't remember. I don't remember my dates. Most likely I did. Most likely I did.
So if you have any different feeling today than you did as of March 1st, 2021, when did that happen?
I don't recall.
Well, give me some idea.
I don't. I didn't. It's not like I woke up and had an epiphany. It's just, it's my opinion.
Did you ever advise anybody that your opinions were different?
I think I've spoken to Mr. Kelly about this.
When did you tell him that you had some different opinions?
I think we've talked about this over the summer.
So when do you think you first told Mr. Kelly you had some different opinion in the case?
I think I've always been pretty clear that I feel Mr. Allen had a role in this outcome.
So you don't think that your opinion is any different than what you've previously expressed to Mr. Kelly about the case?
Again, I think Mr. Allen played a role in this case, and I think
I'm asking a different question. Are you telling us that your opinion today is no different than the opinion you've always expressed to Mr. Kelly about the case?
my opinion's about the same. I think my opinion has always been that Mr. Allen had more of a role in this case than the surgeon.
Is there anything you can identify that you received since March 1st, 2021, besides the EMG studies?
I don't think so.
Keely Lonning's deposition.
That didn't have any bearing on your opinions
No.
concerning the providers, though, did it?
No.
Do you have any notes about the case?
Everything's in here. There's some handwritten notes adjacent to some things and some
I saw those
timelines.
as you were flipping through. Can you retrieve the notes that you've made about the case so we can mark those as Exhibit 4?
They're all dispersed through this notebook.
Okay. Are all of your notes handwritten?
Yes.
You don't have any typed notes?
No. I don't think so. I would not type a note.
I'll let you coordinate with the court reporter and identify for us your notes about the case that we'll mark as Exhibit 4. Do you have bills for this case?
I do.
Where are they?
I think Marcella put them in this notebook.
Would you find them for us?
there, so there are going to be scattered all through this with the various.
So they're not in one place?
No,
Do the bills identify what you did and when you did it?
most likely.
Okay. Let's mark your bills for this case as Exhibit 5. I noticed that the case list that you provided, the trial and deposition list for the last 4 years that Mr. Wiseman was discussing with you, shows a deposition for Keely Lonning. Did you see that?
I don't think I've had a deposition for Keely Lonning until today.
Here's the list Mr. Wiseman was showing you.
Yep.
List of trials depositions in the last 4 years. Lonning, Keely, August 19th, 2020.
So we probably were scheduled for a deposition, and then the pandemic came and it fell through. But you probably never took it off the list. I don't know why it's there. We haven't had any.
Can you look through your materials and identify for us precisely what it is you've reviewed for your work in this case?
So I've got all the imaging from Centennial, all the medical records from Centennial. I've got Marshall Medical Center imaging. I've got a deposition of Keely Lonning. I know I've reviewed the deposition of Mr. Allen. We've got the deposition of the surgeon. I've got this EMG nerve conduction velocity. I've got multiple notes from Vanderbilt.
What Vanderbilt notes do you have?
Vanderbilt neurology. I've seen notes from Dr. Schoenecker. Yeah, here I've got Vanderbilt imaging. I've got more. There's not much I haven't looked at from this case.
Okay. Have you identified for us what you've reviewed in the case now?
I guess I've reviewed everything.
Have you identified for us what you reviewed in the case?
I think I've reviewed all the pertinent facts that have been given to me concerning this case, including medical records, medical imaging, clinic notes, hospital notes, etc.
I understand what you're saying. I want to be sure that I understand what you've been given. I know you've reviewed what you've been given, but have you identified for me what you've been given?
I think so.
Okay. Have you reviewed a life care plan?
I don't believe I have.
So you're not going to be giving any opinions about a life care plan, are you?
I don't think so.
Were there any drafts of your disclosure that you remember marking up and exchanging with Mr. Kelly?
Not that I recall.
Do you recall making any changes to the document he sent you?
I probably did.
Did you keep a copy of that?
I probably did not.
Do you know what you changed?
I do not.
Do you have any medical articles among your materials?
I don't think so.
You've not referenced any for your opinions in this case, have you?
I don't believe so.
And you don't plan to do so, do you?
No.
Have you authored any publications that are in any way pertinent to the issues in this case?
I don't think so.
And is this a current CV here?
I believe it is.
We'll mark the CV as Exhibit 6. And did you also bring your fee schedule?
Yes.
Fee schedule? Fee
Yes.
schedule would be Exhibit 7. Thank you. So your hourly rate for reviewing records is what?
I believe you've got the fee schedule in your hand. $900 an hour.
And your hourly rate for a deposition is what?
$1,100.
And your rate for testifying at trial is what?
Full day of trial is $16,000.
If you come into Nashville one evening, testify the next day, and leave, what's the fee?
It'll probably be $16,000. So for me to turn my lights on here, it cost me $2,500. So yeah, and for me to leave a day of work, it's got to be worth my while. My expenses running a private practice are pretty high.
So if you're out a portion of 2 days, will it be $16,000 or $32,000 for trial testimony?
I have no idea. I haven't had to do it very often, to be honest.
Do you know how much you've billed to date for your work in this case?
I do not.
Is that going to be in the materials that we've marked as Exhibit 5, the bills?
Yes.
Is there any time that you've spent on the case for which you've not submitted a bill?
Possibly, but I don't think so.
Have you ever been a party to a case yourself?
Have I ever been accused of malpractice?
Well, that would be one way. You know, a party to a lawsuit could be the plaintiff, the person bringing the suit, or the defendant, the person sued. So have you been either one?
Yes.
Which have you been?
I was involved with a scoliosis case where the girl was paralyzed.
You were sued?
Yes.
Is that the only time you've been sued for malpractice?
I had another case where the ID bracelet cut into a girl's foot, and the parents came after me.
You were sued in the ID bracelet case?
Correct.
Are those the only 2 times you've been sued?
Yes.
What happened in the scoliosis case where your patient was paralyzed?
She got hypotensive 2 days later, and nobody realized it. And when I went up to check on her, she was paralyzed.
What was the outcome of the case, though? Did it go to trial?
It went to, no, they, what do you call it when they settle it?
It was settled.
It was settled, or, well, no, there's another word. When there's a judge who,
Mediation?
it was mediated.
Did it settle at mediation?
It was mediated between the ICU physicians and myself.
Did you contribute to the settlement?
Yes.
What happened to the ID bracelet case?
So this was a young lady who had a hip dysplasia. I took her ID bracelet off, put her Pavlik harness on. The nurses put her ID bracelet back on under the Pavlik harness, She got out of the hospital. It was an alarm bracelet. How she got out of the hospital, I don't know. When she came into the office for me to check her hips, the ID bracelet had cut into her ankle. Not bad, but enough to upset the mom, and it turned into a lawsuit.
What happened to the lawsuit?
I think my insurance people paid them $2,000, and that was the end of it.
So it was settled also.
Yes.
Have you ever had any hospital privileges revoked or restricted?
No.
You ever been arrested?
No.
You ever had any complaints against you with any medical board?
I had a lady get mad at me in Georgia because I wouldn't let her wear dress shoes in a factory setting where steel-toed shoes were required, and she wanted to wear dress shoes, and she filed a complaint against the medical board.
What happened to the complaint?
I don't think they did anything else with it.
Is that the only time you've ever had a complaint against you with any medical board?
I think a lady got bit by a venomous snake and her finger was stiff, and she filed a complaint with the Virginia Medical Board that I didn't do the best I could despite her picking up a venomous snake and being bitten.
What happened to that complaint?
I think it just got resolved. Nothing
Are those the only two complaints you've had against you with any medical board?
that I'm aware of.
What is your estimate of how many cases you've reviewed as an expert witness?
They make up 1 to 2% of my income. I don't do a lot of these. They'll come in runs. I'll do 2 or 3, and then I won't do anything for a while, and then I'll do 2 or 3.
What's your estimate of how many cases you've reviewed as an expert?
In my lifetime,
Yes.
I'll just say 30.
What's your estimate of the number of depositions you've given as an expert?
A dozen.
How many of those depositions have been in cases that you're reviewing at the request of the patient or plaintiff?
The majority of the cases I'm protecting the physician, but I have gone the other way as well.
How many cases have you been protecting physicians in?
I'd say 70 to 80% of the cases I protect the physician, or I'm an advocate for the physician, or I take the position of protecting the physician. I feel I do what I feel is honest and right.
Have you reviewed other cases for Mr. Kelly besides this one?
Not that I'm aware of.
Have you ever been to any seminars or had any training about how to be an expert witness?
No.
Have you ever reviewed another case involving a femoral osteotomy?
Not to my knowledge.
Do you intend to give an opinion in this case regarding whether Keely Lonning needs an amputation?
I can.
Well, have you been asked to do that, and are you going to do that?
Me and Mr. Kelly have discussed that.
When did you first talk about that?
We've been talking about this for several months now, and I think the EMG and nerve conduction velocity emphasized that's probably something that's going to happen.
When did you come to that conclusion?
Again, it's just been an ongoing thing. The fact that the nerve hasn't recovered and it's been over a year, and the EMG and nerve conduction velocity don't show that there's much going on, leads me to that conclusion.
So it would have been after you reviewed the EMG studies?
That's been part of it.
Did you have the conclusion before you reviewed the EMG studies?
Well, again, the data was heading that way. A year out, not much recovery. It doesn't look promising.
Had you reached a conclusion about whether she would need an amputation before you reviewed the EMG studies?
Probably not.
And you got the EMG studies when?
I'm just going to say a month ago.
Have you ever done an amputation on a patient like Keely Lonning?
I have not.
Have you ever done an amputation for a sciatic nerve injury?
No, not that I can think of.
Keely's about 2 years out from her sciatic nerve injury, right?
Yes,
Are nerve injuries very slow to recover?
yes.
Is it reasonable to anticipate that her neuropathic pain will continue to dissipate?
Probably not.
Is that something that could happen?
It's possible, but unlikely.
Have you examined Keely Lonning?
I have not.
You ever talked to her?
No.
Seen pictures of her leg?
I don't think I've seen pictures of her leg.
You talked to her parents?
I have not.
Is her leg structurally normal?
I think her bones are normal. I think her muscles are not, and her nerves are not.
Does she have any kind of infection with her leg?
Not yet, but if she doesn't have protective sensation, she's probably going to get an infection.
So far, has she had an infection?
Not to my knowledge.
Has she had any vascular problems?
I think her foot gets cold. I think she has some sympathetic issues going on.
Have you ever recommended an amputation for somebody with a structurally normal extremity?
No.
Have you made any demonstrative aids or been provided with any demonstrative aids or illustrations that you intend to use if you're called to testify at trial?
I don't. Well, I mean, again, you know, when Mr. Kelly asked my opinion, I think I pointed him out to some videos about the technique of this surgery, and what he decides to use is up to him, but I don't have any pictures that I plan on using.
Any MRI images that you plan to use or discuss?
There are MRI images out there, and if someone asks me to look at them, I'm delighted to.
Well, I'm asking because there's a statement in your disclosure about those topics, and if you have opinions or things you plan to talk about, I'd like you to tell me what they are.
So I was asked to find some MRI images that demonstrated the nerve injury for Mr. Kelly, and I've sorted through them and found what I thought were some good pictures.
And is it this one page that I've been provided here?
Well, as you know, an MRI is many, 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 many images. So, you know, the MRIs are all in here, but I think we printed a picture or two that demonstrated the thing the best.
Is there any other MRI image that you plan to reference besides this one we have on the table now?
I don't think so.
Okay, let's mark it as Exhibit 8. So what does this image show, doctor?
So, this is a person's leg, and it's almost like you sliced it like a loaf of bread. Their belly button's up here, their backside's down here, their foot's coming at you. This darkened area is the femur. This is a little fluid. You know, this is all muscles around the leg, and then this is the sciatic nerve, and all this white is inflammation and fluid and irritation. And the radiologist, I guess, was kind enough to put a little arrow next to it. Here, I'll just put it all.
Have you advised us during the course of your deposition today about the opinions you hold in the case and the bases for them?
Repeat that, please.
Yeah, I remember when Mr. Wiseman started asking you questions, he told you that we're here to learn the opinions you hold in the case, and I'll add we're here to learn the bases for them. And I just want to know, have you told us those things today, or is there something more we need to talk about?
I think I've told you my opinion.
Okay. I appreciate your time. I don't have anything further now. I may if others ask questions.
Doctor, in the back of that notebook, I saw some flash drives.
Yes,
And
there's 3 of them.
are they marked? Did Marcella mark them for you?
No. One says images, one says medical records, and one is blank. And it may be, all it just says is Lonnie.
One of those may have the depositions on it.
Or it may have been in the email.
Okay. Doctor, the standard of care that you're applying to Mr. Allen, that's the standard of care for a surgical first assistant in Richmond, Virginia, correct?
Yes.
And in your opinion, is Richmond, Virginia similar to Nashville, Tennessee?
Yes.
No further questions.
Questions? There are no more questions. This marks the end of today's deposition. The time is 6:29 p.m. Thank you all very much.
Yes. I think. Your mask.
It is. It would be a shame to mix it
Well,
up.
I don't want to mix it up, so that's why
You know,
this is in my pocket. So
I did put mine on. I had that same conversation